of you.
um, and to that point, one of the things that I realized, even through the stories you've told us now and others, is that being able to have a vocabulary of how to understand these stories is, I think, a part of this process. You know, we often see these stories at face value and not fully understand the underlying meaning or how we can draw meaning out of it in order to use it in a positive way.
Absolutely.
Do you, I mean, it's the person who comes to mind for me is Joseph Campbell and the Journey of a Thousand Heroes, or
yes,
A Thousand Faces.
The hero's journey, yes, which is the basic idea of story structure that is automatically built in to your psyche. This is why it's so important to transmit information as often as possible in story structure, because story structure allows you to retain an understanding of the information being transmitted because it's built into your psyche. Story structure is not something that you invented. Story structure is something you discovered within yourself. And when information is presented in story form, according to the proper structure, it strikes all the correct chords, it resonates within you, and it remains with you for thousands of years, which is why there are stories that have been around that long. But when it is missed, when that story structure is missed, when a component is overlooked, everyone knows the story doesn't quite feel right. It doesn't quite resonate. And therefore, that information isn't retained as well as that which hits all the story structure chords. It's a very important structure within your consciousness.
And I think to that point, I'm finding that when I research more, I guess I call them ancient stories, whether it's from indigenous tribes like the Ojibwe, the stories often resonate more because there's something about the structure or the wording or whatever it is that connects, whereas a lot of the more modern day stories don't seem to, that we've lost some of that essence sometimes.
Yes. So this is an important template to use when transmitting information. Story structure is what allows you to retain over long periods of time the information the story seeks to impart to you.
And then the other part of this is that the stories we tell ourselves, I think there needs to be a certain level of awareness that sometimes we're not even aware of the stories we're telling ourselves.
Yes.
And until we've discovered that, we can't change them.
That is correct. That's why we say it's important to investigate what any fear-based belief is actually saying to you. Because when you actually bring it into the light of your consciousness, what the fear-based belief is actually telling you, you will see that it makes no sense. You will see that it is using story structure to get you to resonate to what it's saying, but you will also at the same time recognize when you bring what it's saying into the light of your consciousness that a lot of the information it is transmitting using story structure is actually false.
Okay.
But you have to identify it. This was the point in the story of Rumpelstiltskin. You have to identify what the fear-based belief actually is saying to you, what it actually is, in order for you to realize that what it's telling you, even though it's using story structure to reinforce it, you have to really hear what it's saying so you can realize that what it's telling you is false about you.
Which has just reminded me of something that what I've discovered recently is that sometimes my emotions and my thoughts are getting in the way of me getting to what the belief is, because the thoughts are creating a story.
But that's what the belief does. You see, belief comes first and it generates emotions, thoughts, behaviors, and experiences in that order. And so what it's doing, because physical reality isn't real on its own, it actually has to be reinforced by a belief system, positive or negative, to allow you to perceive physical reality as if it's solid, as if it's really a place that you're in, which it's not. It's just a projection of consciousness. So the tools that beliefs use are the generation of emotion, so it feels real, what they're telling you, and thoughts so that you think about it and reinforce the reality and make it sound factual, and behaviors so that when you then behave as you feel and think, you get the reflective experience back that reinforces the idea of what the belief system, whether positive or negative, is actually telling you. That's why you have to be able to see and discern clearly what the belief is telling you in order to change the belief, because all beliefs have to use the emotions, thoughts, and behaviors and experiences to reinforce themselves in order to make it seem as if you're actually in a real reality, which you're not.
Thank you.
Does that help?
It does help a lot. Thank you.
Yes. The belief is the blueprint of your reality experience. The emotions are the builders. The thoughts are the building materials. The behaviors are the way in which the builders assemble the reality. And of course, the experience is the reflection of living in that building that they built. But if there's something off kilter, you always have to trace that back to the blueprint to see what is out of alignment in the blueprint, and then change that so that the builders and the building materials and the style of building are all in alignment with the kind of house that you prefer to live in as an experience. Always go back to the blueprint. Always go back to the belief. When you have experiences you don't prefer, behaviors you don't prefer, thoughts you don't prefer, emotions you don't prefer, own them, because you're choosing to create them by buying into a certain belief. But you can also know that you can trace them all back to something you must believe is true in order to be having those emotions, those thoughts, and those behaviors and that experience, because they don't exist in a vacuum on their own. There has to be something you believe to be true first before you can feel, think, or behave in any way, shape, or form, or have any kind of a reflective experience. Make sense?
Yes.
Does that help?
It does.
All right. Anything else?
I'd like to talk a little bit about frequencies and resonance. And I think some of the things you've already mentioned might also fit in as we go.
Yes.
So you mentioned in a transmission recently that this idea of the 11th harmonic and how it could break down viruses or cancer cells or bacteria.
Yes.
And initially, I did some research. I found these amazing videos where I saw this happening. But I thought that the idea of an 11th harmonic seemed like a strange relationship. And so I wondered is there something there to do with the golden ratio to the power of 5, or am I missing the mark completely?
No, you are sort of on target. There's a little bit more that needs to be discovered by you to understand all the nuances of it, but you're generally going in the right direction.
Okay. Because from what I'm understanding about this is it's about the relationship between one frequency and another and the resonance of those frequencies.
Yes.
Okay. So then based on that as well, following along this research, it turned out that the COVID virus in general seemed to be about 300,000 hertz was what was the 11th harmonic frequency. And I remember you mentioning that people have a signature frequency between 150,000 and 300,000. Is that correct?
It's a little bit different what we're referring to than what you're discovering in your reality, though there are connections between it. But the kind of frequency resonance signatures that we give to many of you are a kind of thing that your science doesn't know about yet.
Okay. So I'm mixing up two ideas there that I shouldn't be connecting.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then on that note, because I know that you've mentioned as well that the Sasani people are experiencing time, I think, 10 times faster than we are.
Yes.
And I would think then also it means that the frequencies that you're experiencing or resonating at are 10 times higher. And I wondered if...
Not exactly in the way, again, we give you those frequencies, but yes. Remember, in general, we are saying that 333,000 cycles per second of the kind of frequency, of the kind of energy we're talking about, is the borderline between physical and non-physical reality. This is a different scale of things that we're talking about here.
Okay, so what I should be exploring or researching is the kind of frequencies. If I want to better understand what I'm looking at, I need to better understand that aspect of it.
Yes, and basically you're simply talking about whatever your equipment is capable of doing in terms of identifying the frequency of a particular thing like a virus. All you really have to do is go 11 times higher.
Okay.
In order to counteract the idea. Because you're pushing it up, in a sense. This principle is the same in both frequency counts, in both scales. you're pushing it up with a harmonic that induces it to raise a frequency to a point where the effects of the virus at the lower frequency can no longer exist.
So even though there's a resonance there, because even the idea of resonance is not positive or negative, it is simply
Correct.
about how the two relate to each other.
Correct.
Okay. So the other thing on that note is when you offer someone their current signature frequency, does the higher mind have a separate signature frequency, or is that contained in that idea?
No, it has a separate frequency. We're only talking about a frequency that relates to the idea of physical reality. The higher mind would be operating, as I said, above 333,000 cycles per second. That's where you shift from physical to non-physical reality.
Because that's fifth density.
Yes.
Okay. So then one of the other things that we've spoken about before, or you've mentioned, is the gamma states and the brain waves being between 40 and 100 hertz.
Yes.
And that helps us connect better with our higher selves, our higher mind.
Yes.
And is that because there is a resonance that is created there? Because I think that's where I'm struggling to connect the dots per se.
Yes, there is a resonant relationship there. Yes.
Okay. So by being in the gamma state, that in effect also changes our signature frequency, which then also puts us in a more resonant frequency of the higher mind.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for helping me.
It is our passion and our pleasure. Thank you.
And then if I may, a couple more things. So you've kind of already touched on this, but it also means that lower frequencies aren't necessarily negative. They just might be dissonant to
and also may have their own harmonics that are positive for a variety of different reasons and different effects. Yes.
Okay. And even this idea of integrating as we move forward is about integrating these lower frequencies. It's not about negating them or invalidating them.
No, it's about raising your frequency in a way that is harmonic with the frequencies that you need to maintain a physical reality perspective.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'd like to touch on awareness and reality, which we've already kind of looked at. You've mentioned this idea that phones and computers, from what I understand, are essentially portals to parallel realities.
We never said it that way, no. What we said is it's a way of training yourself to be able to touch into the idea of parallel realities by using some of your technology, including the concept of your internet. We never said that the devices themselves were portals to parallel realities.
Thank you. Yes, that was my term, I guess, that I was attaching to it. So then, based on that idea, I'm aware of, for instance, right now there are protests happening in America and around the world. There's the virus that's happening. It's not necessarily happening in my reality. It's happening in these parallel realities, which I'm
capable of observing. Yes.
Okay. And then, so to that note, I've seen the fear and the anger, as well as moments of transformation and integration that's happening.
Yes, it's all happening now to give everyone the opportunity to see all the choices and to be able to really choose the vibration they prefer and act accordingly, so that over time you can continue to experience only the reflections of the reality you prefer. But for a while, you will still be able to observe all the different choices that people are making, but that doesn't mean you're being affected by them in any negative way that you don't prefer to be.
So on that note of being affected by them, 3 months ago when this all started happening, I was following a lot of the news, and I became, I guess, ill for about a week. And then again recently with being aware of and following the protests, I became ill for about a week.
All right.
And I'm wondering if I'm matching that energy somehow, or if I'm empathizing in a way that I'm not separating myself from those experiences.
Correct.
You're testing yourself. You are feeling out the resonances to see what you do and don't prefer.
Okay. And thank you for reminding me that as long as I stay in a positive state, which I did the first time around, and again now, I'm finding that it's also transforming a lot quicker. I don't
Of course.
see it as a negative experience. It's just that I'm experiencing it, and then I get to choose whether it's positive or negative.
For you, yes. That doesn't mean you don't necessarily recognize when someone takes a negative action. It's not a denial of whether a particular act is positive or negative, but it's simply the ability to recognize that even though someone else may act out of negativity in a certain way, that doesn't mean that you can't transform it into a positive result for yourself.
Yeah. I do feel that I'm not necessarily experiencing the fear or the anger, but I'm experiencing it through those people, or I can attach with what they.
You are observing.
Thank you.
And you can, through your own history and experience, relate. But again, that doesn't mean you have to necessarily choose to match that frequency in the reality that you prefer to be in.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does. I have one more thing. Let me pick one and actually stick to it. So I've noticed that in, I don't know, the last 3 or 4 months, I've been meditating quite consistently, and when I do, I get the sensation just in front of my forehead or around my forehead. I'm actually feeling it right now.
Yeah.
I'm likening it to something like my third eye opening up.
Yes.
Or,
yes.
And well, I guess I'm trying to figure out how to use that experience, or use what is happening.
Well, what state of being does it put you in? Does it put you in a state of being using that permission slip that you prefer to be in?
It does.
Then act from that state of being. You know what it feels like. So know that anytime you reflect on or remember what that felt like when you did it, you're in that state of being again, even if it doesn't feel the same. So use it as a guiding mechanism in that way to put yourself in the state of being you prefer to be in, and then take the actions in your life on your passion from that state of being.
Okay. So
You'll be more aligned.
It's my permission slip to switch into that state and then act from that state whenever I choose to. It's just a physical representation.
Yes.
Okay.
And you're doing it through the idea of the third eye, because that helps you see things more clearly.
Bashar, as always, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and much love.
Again, it is our passion and our pleasure. Thank you for the co-creation of the interaction. Good day.